The cavernous hall at Fort Liberty, draped in the maroon and blue of the 82nd Airborne, fell into a deep, uncomfortable silence. Hundreds of soldiers in their finest dress uniforms, men and women who'd faced enemies across the globe, now just stared frozen at the drama unfolding on stage. My father, Brigadier General Antonio Torres, a man carved from granite and Army regulations, stood at the podium. His voice a command that had broken lesser men echoed through the hall. His eyes, though, weren't on the crowd. They were on me. In this division, he boomed his words a physical blow. We value integrity. We value courage. And we do not tolerate failure that compromises the lives of our soldiers. My heart hammered against my ribs a frantic trapped bird. I stood at attention before him, my own dress uniform feeling like a costume of shame. He held up my Parachutist Badge, the silver wings I'd earned with blood sweat, and 5 terrifying jumps from a perfectly good airplane. This badge represents trust. He spat his face, a mask of cold fury. Trust that you will hold the line. Trust that you will not break. Then he did the unthinkable. In front of the entire command staff, in front of my peers, in front of the institution that was my whole life, he didn't just dismiss my qualification. With a sharp, violent tug that was a complete violation of every protocol, he ripped the badge from my uniform. A collective gasp went through the hall. The sound of tearing cloth was louder than any explosion I'd ever heard. You are a disgrace to this uniform and to the legacy of this division. He whispered for my ears, only a blade of ice in my heart. You're relieved of your duties. An investigation will follow. He thought he'd destroyed me. He thought he was purging a stain from his precious honor. He had no idea he'd just handed me the weapon I needed. Because as I was escorted from that hall, my face burning with a humiliation so profound, it felt like acid. I knew one thing he didn't. He was wrong. And in 2 weeks, I would be back. Not as a disgraced captain, but as the officer who would expose the real traitor. And this time the one leaving in disgrace wouldn't be me. Before we get into how I turned the tables on the most powerful man I knew, take a moment to subscribe for more stories of justice. If you believe respect is earned, not given, hit that like button. Let me know in the comments what's more important, loyalty to family or loyalty to the truth. To understand how my own father could do that, you have to understand my world. I wasn't just an army brat. I was a scion of the Torres military dynasty. My grandfather was a command sergeant major. My father, a West Point grad who saw the world in olive drab and enemy red. From day one, a path was laid out for me, paved with concrete expectations. And for most of my life, I walked it. I went to the academy. I chose military intelligence, the art of knowing the enemy. My father respected its rigor, but distrusted its lack of mud on the boots. I was good at my job. As an S2, the chief intelligence officer for my brigade, I could read a battlefield from satellite imagery like a scholar reads a book. But to my father, I was always Izzy, his daughter playing soldier. He saved his real approval for his aide, Captain Mark Fallon. Mark was the son my father never had. Handsome, charming, radiating an effortless confidence. He was always there, a step behind my father, with the right binder, the right piece of info, the right deferential smile. He'd say things like, "Sir, your daughter is brilliant, of course. A bit academic, perhaps. Not like you. You have that gut instinct." He planted seeds of doubt with a surgeon's precision, and my father, who valued his gut above all else, let them grow. The tension came to a head during the planning for Operation Anvil Strike, the division's biggest command post exercise in a decade. As a lead intelligence planner for my section, the success of my brigade's role hinged on my analysis. For months I lived in a SCIFA, secure, windowless room, building the enemy's order of battle, mapping their networks, and writing the intel summary that was the Bible for the exercise. It was the most important work of my career. My father, as the deputy division commander, was the ultimate authority. Every briefing went through him, and every time Captain Fallon was there at his elbow, watching, listening. The first day of Operation Anvil Strike was a disaster. It wasn't just a failure, it was a rout. The opposing force, or OPFOR, moved with an unnerving prescience. We shifted a battalion east. They had an ambush waiting. We planned an air assault. They had surface-to-air missile simulators at the landing zone. They knew our playbook, our contingencies. It was like they were sitting in our command post with us. The exercise was halted. The air turned toxic with blame. An intel breach of this magnitude could only mean one thing: a leak. A traitor. Army Counterintelligence and the Criminal Investigation Division, or CID, launched an immediate investigation. Within 48 hours, they had their preliminary finding. The Master Intelligence Summary for Anvil: strike a file so sensitive it could get a person locked away in Fort Leavenworth for a long, long time, had been accessed and transferred from the secure network. The credentials used the digital fingerprints left all over the crime scene were mine. Captain Isabella Torres. I was brought into a sterile interrogation room. Two grim-faced investigators, a man from CID and a woman from counterintelligence, laid out the evidence. They showed me the logs, my username, the exact timestamp of the transfer which occurred while I was supposedly asleep. The destination was a non-secure channel that vanished into the dark web. It was a perfect, elegant frame-up. "Did you do this, Captain?" the CID agent asked. "No," I said, my own voice a stranger's. My mind was racing. How this was too clean. This was professional. "Did you give your password to anyone? Did anyone have access to your workstation?" the CI agent pressed. "No, absolutely not." They didn't believe me. I could see it in their eyes. The evidence was irrefutable. The word spread like a virus. The general's daughter, the brilliant S2, was a traitor. The whispers followed me down hallways. The looks from my fellow soldiers were a mix of pity and contempt. The call from my father came that evening. He didn't yell. That would have been easier. Instead, his voice was dangerously calm. "My office, 5 minutes." I stood at attention in front of his massive oak desk. He didn't offer me a seat. "I have spent 30 years building a name in this army." He began, his voice low and menacing. "A name synonymous with honor. You took less than 3 years as a captain to burn it to the ground." "Sir, it wasn't me." I pleaded, the word "sir" tasting like ash. "I was framed. The data is wrong." "The data is never wrong, Isabella." He roared, slamming his hand on the desk. "It just is. And it says you either sold us out or you are so incompetent you shouldn't be leading a platoon. Which is it? Are you a traitor or a fool?" I stared at him, my throat closing up. He wasn't my father. He was a general, and I was a failure threatening his legacy. Standing just behind him was Captain Fallon, his face a perfect picture of somber concern. He met my eyes for a fleeting second, and in them I saw a flicker of something cold and triumphant. And I knew. I didn't know how, but I knew. It was him. But I couldn't say it. Accusing the general's trusted aide with no proof, it would sound like a desperate lie, making me look even more guilty. I realized I had to stay silent to protect any chance of them finding the real mole. "I have nothing to say, sir," I finally choked out. His face hardened into pure disgust. "I see. The division ball is tomorrow night. You will be there. You will personify the consequences of failure. Then you will be on administrative leave until the investigation is complete. Get out of my sight." And that brought us to the ball. As I stood on that stage watching him tear my wings from my chest, I understood. This wasn't military justice. It was a public execution, an act of brutal symbolic purification. He was showing the 82nd that his loyalty was to the institution, not his own blood. As 2 military police officers escorted me from the hall, a cold clarity settled over me. My father had declared war on me, and in a war of intelligence, he was an amateur. The next 2 weeks were the longest of my life. I was confined to my small apartment. My government laptop confiscated my security clearance, suspended my phone buzzing with calls I couldn't answer, and venomous, anonymous texts. I was a pariah. But they had made one critical mistake. They took my job, my reputation, my access. They hadn't taken my mind, and they had underestimated my network. My first and only call was to Chief Warrant Officer 4 David Davies, a legend in the Army's counterintelligence community. He'd spent 25 years hunting spies and digital ghosts. We'd worked together once, and he was the only person I knew who would believe me without evidence. I met him in a noisy coffee shop far from Fort Liberty. I couldn't tell him anything classified. I was on a legal tightrope, so I didn't talk about Operation Anvil Strike. I talked about patterns. It wasn't just a data dump, Chief, I said. The leak was too good to intuitive. The OPFOR wasn't just reacting to our plan. They were anticipating our commander's thoughts. They knew who was aggressive, who was cautious. That's not in an intel summary. That's the kind of insight you only get from being in the room. Davies listened, his eyes unblinking. You're saying the mole isn't just someone who stole a file. They're someone with access to the command's decision-making cycle. Constant access, I confirmed. Someone in every briefing, someone who hears the formal plan and the informal what-ifs that follow. The inner circle, Davies murmured. The very center of it. A simple data transfer from my workstation is too clumsy. It's what they want you to find. You need to look past the network logs. Look at the personal devices people carry in and out of the SCIF every day. He nodded slowly. The general's encrypted tablet, the one he uses for his daily intelligence update. It's the only device present for every single critical conversation, I said. If I were going to bug a command, that's where I'd put my money. Davies left without another word. I had given him a thread, and I knew he would pull on it until the whole thing unraveled. Meanwhile, Captain Mark Fallon was playing his part to perfection. I saw pictures on social media Mark at my father's side. Mark briefing a congressman. He was the loyal son stepping up while the prodigal daughter had fallen. My father, consumed by his own sense of betrayal, was completely blind. He wanted to see a perfect loyal aide, so Mark was perfect and loyal. He wanted to see a flawed daughter, so I was flawed. Fallon played on this masterfully. I could almost hear him, shaking his head in feigned sadness. I just can't believe Izzy would do this, sir. The pressure of being your daughter. It must have been immense. He was a viper, poisoning my father's mind with sympathy. 10 days later, Davies called me from a secure line. His voice was grim. You were right. My heart leaped. The tablet, a firmware-level mirroring program. It was buried so deep, our standard sweeps missed it. Custom job. It activated the mic and camera during briefings, recorded everything, then exfiltrated the data the next time the device connected to a non-military network. Planted during a software update, I guessed. A routine one 6 months ago, Davies confirmed. Signed for and personally supervised by one Captain Mark Fallon. The final pieces clicked into place. Do you have motive? I asked, my voice shaking. We do now. Once we knew where to look, we got a warrant for his offshore financials. He has a bank account in the Caymans with over $200,000 in it. He wasn't a spy for ideology. He was a common thief selling our secrets to the highest bidder. Relief washed over me, so powerful it almost buckled my knees. I was innocent, but relief was quickly replaced by cold anger. And my father... Fallon has been playing him like a fiddle, Davies said. The general's own confirmation bias made him the perfect cover. The final report went straight to the division commander, General Peterson. The evidence was irrefutable. Peterson did something I didn't expect. He called me to his office the next day. Captain Torres. He said, his eyes filled with a mixture of anger and respect. On behalf of this command, I offer you my deepest apologies. You have been subjected to an injustice that no soldier should ever endure. Thank you, sir, I managed. Don't thank me, he said, his voice hardening. Thank your own integrity. You endured public humiliation, and instead of breaking, you used your intellect to guide us to the truth. That is the definition of courage. He walked to his desk. Your promotion to major was approved by the board 3 months ago. It was put on hold when the investigation began. I have just signed the order to make it effective immediately. He handed me the folder. Inside were the orders. It was real. There is another division ball in 2 days for All-American Week. He set a shrewd look in his eye. I believe it would be the most appropriate venue to set the record straight and to formally recognize your new rank. He paused. I've also requested that your father do the honors of pinning on your new rank. A public humiliation to be answered by a public vindication. Penance served cold. "I will be there, sir," I said. The war was over. All that was left was to claim victory. The atmosphere at the second ball was thick with tension. The news of my exoneration hadn't been made public, but rumors of a major shakeup were spreading. All anyone knew was that I, the disgraced daughter, had been invited. My father and Captain Fallon were at the head table. Fallon was in his element, laughing, shaking hands. My father looked tired. He kept glancing at the main entrance, his jaw tight. Then, at precisely 2000 hours, the doors swung open. A hush fell. I walked in. My uniform was immaculate. On my shoulders were not the silver bars of a captain, but the gleaming gold oak leaves of a major. My Parachutist Badge, a new one, was pinned perfectly over my heart. I kept my eyes forward as I walked the entire length of the hall. I could feel hundreds of eyes on me, filled with shocked confusion and dawning understanding. I saw my father's face. The color drained from it. He looked like he'd seen a ghost, but it was Fallon's face I enjoyed the most. His smile faltered, then collapsed into pure, unadulterated panic. He knew. I stopped before the head table and rendered a crisp salute to General Peterson. "Sir Major Torres reporting as ordered." Peterson returned the salute, a grim smile on his lips. He walked to the podium. "Ladies and gentlemen of the 82nd Airborne Division," he began. "True character is revealed not when things are easy, but when they are hard." He spoke about the intelligence breach, the shadow it cast. An investigation by Army counterintelligence uncovered a plot not of negligence, but of deliberate betrayal. A plot to sell the safety of our soldiers for personal gain. He then looked directly at Mark Fallon. The entire room followed his gaze. Fallon looked like he was about to be sick. The spy was not a foreign agent. Peterson declared, his voice like cracking ice. The spy was one of our own, someone we trusted, someone who used that access to commit heinous crimes against this division and this country. He paused. "Captain Mark Fallon," he said the name, dropping like a stone. "Your service as aide to the deputy commander is concluded." As if on cue, two large men in sharp suits, CID agents, materialized behind Fallon's chair. One leaned in and whispered in his ear. Fallon went completely ashen. He looked at my father, desperate. "Sir, General?" My father just stared, his expression one of utter horror. The son he had chosen was a traitor. The daughter he had cast out was the hero who had exposed him. His entire world was collapsing in real time. "Captain Fallon," Peterson's voice boomed, "you are under arrest for violations of the Uniform Code of Military Justice, including espionage and aiding the enemy." The CID agents pulled Fallon to his feet. They didn't cuff him, not there. But the way they held his arms made it clear he was a prisoner as they led him from the hall. Peterson wasn't finished. His eyes found me. "And now it is my distinct honor to right a terrible wrong and to formally recognize the officer whose unwavering integrity, sharp intellect, and profound courage saved this division." He gestured for me to join him on stage. "Major Isabella Torres," he announced, and the hall erupted. The applause was deafening, a thunderous roar of approval and apology. "And now," Peterson said, turning to my father with a look of cold command, "I believe the deputy commander has a duty to perform." My father moved like a man in a dream. He walked onto the stage and stood before me, holding the gold oak leaves of a major in his trembling hands. He couldn't meet my gaze. Mechanically, he unpinned the captain's bars I had worn when he disowned me. His fingers fumbled as he pinned the gold oak leaf onto my uniform. He had stripped me of my honor in this very room. Now he was forced to be the one to restore it tenfold. The penance was complete. The symbolism was brutal, and it was perfect. After the applause finally died down, I found my father standing alone by a pillar. He looked like a statue crumbling to dust. "Izzy," he started, his voice a hoarse whisper. I had no idea. If I had known, I held up a hand, stopping him. An apology now was meaningless. It was a reaction to his own public humiliation, not my pain. "You saw what you wanted to see, General." I said, my voice quiet but hard as steel. "You looked at me and saw a disappointment. You looked at him and saw a hero. The truth was never part of your equation." He flinched. What I did, it was unforgivable. Yes, I agreed without heat. You didn't take my wings, Father. You can't take something you didn't give. You just took my trust, and you will never get that back. The words landed, shattering the last of his defenses. He opened his mouth, but I didn't give him the chance. I brought my heels together, raised my hand in a perfect textbook salute, and held it. General, I said, my voice clear and formal, devoid of any daughterly affection. He stared at me, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. Shakily, he returned the salute. His hand trembled. I held it for a beat, then dropped my hand, turned on my heel, and walked away. I didn't look back. I walked out of that ballroom and into the cool night air. I had won, but it didn't feel like a victory. It felt like a graduation. My father thought honor was a legacy to be protected. That night I understood true honor isn't inherited. It's forged in the crucible of injustice, tempered by integrity, and revealed by the choices you make when no one is looking. He hadn't stripped me of my wings. He had only forced me to realize I had my own. The goal was never revenge. It was the restoration of truth. And as I walked away from the man who raised me, leaving him in the wreckage of his own making, I knew I had finally irrevocably stepped out of his shadow and into the light of my own command.